I welcome everybody to another episode of the Men's Sexual Mastery Podcast. This is your host, Ben Timby, joined by my fellow co-host and co-founder, Ian Hawks. Welcome, brother.
Hey, everybody. Hey, Ben. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's great to be here. And today we're going to be talking about a topic that is very foundational for so many men who get into this work, and that is porn addiction and how to overcome your porn addiction. I've shared on previous podcasts that I personally was addicted to porn from a young age, I think around 10 years old, for decades. And it really affected my ability to meet women, to interact with women. It affected my libido, my self-confidence. And in a lot of these teachings, if you've been listening to this podcast for a while now, you know that our sexual energy is our life force energy. It is the most sacred energy in our bodies. And it can be used as rocket fuel for our personal growth, for our workouts, for building businesses, for creative outlets, not to mention epic lovemaking. And, the ability we have to separate orgasm and ejaculation and all these levels of sexual experience that we can have that are so far beyond just a ejaculatory orgasm or looking at pornography and just releasing the energy all the time and being isolated. So our intention on this podcast is to offer a framework and tools, a reframe for men who may be listening, who are out there that are struggling with porn addiction, so that you can reclaim your sexual power. And so one of the biggest reframes we bring at Men's Sexual Mastery that is different from many people who are teaching, how to overcome porn is that we actually don't support you resisting it. We don't support you suppressing it. What you resist persists. We all know this. You're feeding it by fighting it. So instead, what we like to say is we like to create a system that consciously moves your sexual energy, that channels it, and that outperforms the pornography, that you're getting more pleasure from something, more dopamine, more oxytocin, and just feeling better about yourself and attracting an ideal partner and having actual sex with an actual partner. That is our objective, because most men who are stuck in porn addiction are actually deeply sexually unfulfilled. And we all know this, at the end of looking at a bunch of porn, you just feel that emptiness. So what we're going to get into today is how to outperform your porn addiction with something that is more sexually fulfilling. So with that, I want to pass it over to Hawks and hear a little bit, brother, about where you see this shift and what you recommend for guys who are just beginning this journey of breaking free from porn addiction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great little backdrop you've painted for us, Ben. And I will also add in that this doesn't just apply to men who identify with having an addiction around porn. I often use the phrase chronic porn use. If there's a habitual pattern that you've developed and are continuing to engage in where you're using porn on a regular basis, that is a habit, and it's typically something worth looking at. And the question that I always ask guys that I'm working with is, if you're using porn, is that serving you or is it hurting you? What's the impact of that? For some men, it might not be a problem. Maybe it's really infrequent use and they feel in integrity and in alignment with the sporadic porn use that they may engage with. For other men, and I would say for most men that come through our program, there's a deep sense of something being out of alignment, even if it's not a really big problem in their life, actually. And I would say for many men, it's something that they have already been working on removing. And it's just this nagging, still persistent energy that feels out of alignment with their integrity. And so just saying that wherever you're at in your relationship or use of porn, the question is ultimately, what is your inner authority guiding you towards? Is this a problem in your life? Is this out of alignment or not? And just going from there, because we don't like to make porn the enemy. It's, as you said, it's not in our approach about replacing or suppressing it. It's It's about replacing it. Or I think I might have said that. Replacing,
It's not about fighting it. It's about
resisting or
replacing it.
fighting. It's
Yeah.
actually
It's
about
dancing with it.
replacing. Yeah, and replacing it,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
typically for men engaging in regular porn use, there is a self-soothing element of that
Mm.
engagement. It's providing some sense of relief, comfort, numbing for their nervous system. And that's a coping mechanism that's been learned over many, many years or decades. And so we all have coping mechanisms. We all have self-soothing practices, whether we're conscious of them or not, that we have either, adopted or, chosen. And ultimately what we're working towards in this pathway is consciously choosing the practices that allow us to actually nourish the parts of ourselves that are asking for some attention. And so the next question, if porn use does feel out of alignment, or if it feels like it's a problem and inhibiting your flow in life, then the question is, what role is that serving for you? And really
Mhm.
getting curious and honest about what is it that leads me to use porn, what's coming up for me as I'm feeling that pull or that push towards porn use, and then sitting with that feeling for a little bit and just being curious about
Mhm.
it, learning, okay, what is it? Am I seeking connection here? Am I feeling stressed out and wound up and looking for a release, looking for a dissipation of this uncomfortable energy? Are there emotions that are bubbling up that are uncomfortable? And am I looking for a way to avoid actually feeling
Mhm.
those things? These are some of the big ones that tend to come up. Or am I just lonely and, feeling isolated and looking for some sense of connection? And then once we have a more realistic understanding of what role that porn use is serving, then there's the opportunity
Mhm.
to look at and do a little journaling practice on what are some other ways that I could meet these needs.
Mhm.
And then another one that I didn't mention there is sexual expression, pleasure,
Mhm. Mhm.
which is a big, a big need for many, probably most people.
Mhm.
And it's one that for many of us, it was not something we were taught how to nourish for ourselves. It's either,
Mhm.
you're in a relationship or having frequent sex and getting some fulfillment, hopefully lots of fulfillment in that way. Or if you don't have a sexual partner, then for most men, the sort of default pattern is some sort of external visual stimulus, whether it's porno mags back in the day, or pornographic videos, or even now like VR or some other type
Mhm.
of augmented reality. It's just getting, more and more stimulating, but ultimately it's the same element of placing our attention outside of ourselves, outside of our own bodily experience and sensation, fixating on an image, a sexualized graphic of some form, and then pleasuring ourselves in a mechanical, highly tense way that then leads to an ejaculation. And that's one way to do it. But ultimately, there's many other ways that we can actually nourish that desire for arousal and pleasure and the orgasmic state within ourselves. So that was quite a long riff, but I I would start by inviting the listener to inquire with themselves, what am I actually looking to fulfill here? And then once you get clear on that, then there's a more tangible path forward when we talk about replacing the habit of porn use with something else.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you started with that piece. And I think it's one really important point that I think you touched on briefly, but I want to expand on is releasing shame
Hmm.
and really owning our sexuality as a gift, and all of these desires within us as a gift. Like you desiring more sexual connection or expression is a gift. You desiring not to be lonely, to feel connected. Like what a beautiful gift. That's what builds not just relationships and families, but communities and friendships, like all of that, not being isolated. What a gift,
Can
man.
can I can I expand on that briefly, just for some more clarity? Are you speaking to the gift being this uncomfortable energy that
Mm-hmm.
that's welling up inside us,
Yeah.
that's ultimately there to push us in the direction of what our heart or our soul is asking for? Is that what you mean by the
Yeah.
gift of it? Because some
Yeah.
people might be listening to that and be like, what do you mean? Being lonely and miserable, that's not a gift, it feels
No,
terrible.
just exactly what you said. Yeah, I appreciate that question, that clarifying question. Yeah, exactly. Just like that this discomfort is actually like a polarity. It's something pulling you towards a deeper level of fulfillment in your life. And by seeking constant release or escape through porn or ejaculation, and not that, again, we're not even saying those things inherently are bad. Largely, for the most part, most men who I know who frequently interact with those things find it depleting, or they're not usually very happy. That's just a fact of patterns I notice. But generally speaking, like if we just took away all of the calling it so bad or trying to resist it or all these things, and just like you're talking about, get to the root of like what need is this filling, and then actually bring in a deeper level of fulfillment to those needs. That's a great place to start. And I know there's many more directions we can go, but I love this as like one of the primary pillars for overcoming porn addiction. So Hawks, I'd like to turn it back to you and ask, how would a man replace those needs, if they're being met by porn or frequent porn use and ejaculation, such as the ones we mentioned: sexual connection, maybe releasing stress, maybe sexual expression, all of these things. What are some ways that a guy could replace those needs with something that's more fulfilling, that could outperform it eventually?
Well, our signature approach is the solo cultivation practice. We've spoken about this before. Um, the the like the reframe from masturbation to solo cultivation is what we call it. You could call it self pleasure. I find a lot of guys don't really vibe with the term self pleasure. I think that works for women, but
Yeah.
for a lot of men, there's some resistance there. So yeah, we use the term solo cultivation because we're cultivating this energy, and in doing that, we're also honoring the desire for pleasure and sexual arousal, and allowing that to have an outlet. But it's an outlet that has clear frameworks, clear boundaries. One of the, first and foremost of those boundaries being, hey, we're not using external stimulus, we're not using porn, we're not using visual imagery, and even fantasy is something that we temper. It's okay, and for most men, a necessary step along the path towards removing external stimulus. But even fantasy is a type of external stimulus.
Mhm. And just to be clear on that, what you're referring to is like we do recommend it's okay if you need to use a little fantasy in the beginning just to get the fire lit, to get
Mhm.
it stoking, to get an erection and those things. But what we're mentioning in this practice is releasing that as soon as possible, and then and I know you'll get more into this, but staying in the feeling of
Mhm.
experience, staying in the breath, and staying in the parasympathetic state instead of the clenching in the sympathetic, and see what happens from that space.
Yeah. Yeah. So the practice of solo cultivation is about being in the body. being embodied. And that means our
Mm-hmm.
consciousness is actually present inside our physical body, feeling the sensations that are arising. And through that process, what often happens is emotions will bubble up as well, because emotions are typically stored in our body. The issues are in the tissues, as they say, or the body keeps the score. And so there's also a detoxification process, or another way of saying it is just a feeling, an allowance that we can create for our own physical experience to be actually felt and acknowledged. And that's
Mm-hmm.
the sensations, subtle or big sensations in our body, and also the emotional experience of whatever's just below the surface that busyness of life can often keep us detached from in some way, but it's still there. We're still bringing it into every interaction and every experience that we have in the day, but creating the space to actually feel what's there. And so this is also getting into meditation, because solo cultivation is weaving meditation and self
Mm-hmm.
pleasure. It's bringing the meditative mind and approach into sexual arousal. Another important, piece to mention around solo cultivation is that the vast majority of the time, this practice does not involve an ejaculation at the end. So we're also retraining our nervous system to be able to experience heightened levels of arousal, whether that's sexual pleasure arousal or just the stimulus of being in an aroused state, heightened heightened blood pressure or
Mm-hmm.
heart rate, whether it's a heated discussion with a coworker or a boss or an employee, or it's just the discomfort of putting ourselves through higher levels of physical intensity. All of this is an experience in our nervous system of activation.
Which is similar to the high levels of sexual arousal that are leading to ejaculation, right? That's the link, right?
Yeah,
It's that same state.
yeah. So without going into all of that, because that's serving a different role, there's overlap, but that's serving a different role than what we're speaking to more specifically here with porn use. But just mentioning that as another element of the solo cultivation practice.
Mm-hmm.
I want to come back to the meditation though, because for a lot of men, there's a lot of resistance to solo cultivation,
Mm-hmm.
because it does require us to actually feel what's going on. And depending on where you're at, there might be so much going on just below the surface, with uncomfortable emotional experiences, aspects of life that are out of alignment, discomfort in your own body, or a blockage to actually loving yourself, to self love, to having the compassion to actually bring tender, loving touch and care to your own body. This is also
Mm-hmm.
very common for men. And so the solo cultivation for men who are ready for it is a profound practice to bring in. And for some men, that might be actually a step further down the path. And so if we just bring it back to meditation,
Mm-hmm.
removing the physical arousal aspect of solo cultivation and just bringing it back to meditation, sitting with ourselves and feeling what's there inside our physical body without attachment to the discomfort dissolving, or without attachment
Mm-hmm.
to the pleasure or the comfortable sensations being there either, and just being with what is. And that practice is also a necessary step for us to, like I was saying earlier, become aware of what's actually going on. What is it that's leading me to these habits, like porn use, for example? And so, sitting with ourselves and bringing the awareness inside the body to notice what's going on. That's, I would say, for the other another really common reason why many men use porn is that self-soothing. It's it's a way to distract or numb oneself
Hmm.
from the discomfort that's ever present in their experience of just living. And
Hmm.
so, ultimately the way through is in, and you got to feel it to heal it, they say. So actually
Hmm.
just adopting a practice of sitting with yourself in the discomfort and not fixating on how can I alleviate this discomfort through, you know, eating or watching
Hmm.
TV or looking at porn or drugs or alcohol, and allowing ourselves, even if it's just for 5 minutes, to sit in that discomfort. Because when we allow ourselves to actually be with it, it does start to dissolve naturally on its own.
Hmm.
But it can feel really big and overwhelming at first. So this is why depending on where you're at, like there's no black and white in our approach. For some men, cutting porn out, right away, 100% is just not a realistic pathway.
Hmm.
Even if that might be where they want to get to eventually,
Yeah.
we're not advising everyone to just go cold turkey per se. Um, And then I would like to speak to the benefits of having a period of abstaining from certain habits. Um, we can get
Real.
to that. Yeah, we can get to that after, but I'd love to hear what
Yeah.
you add to that.
Yeah, no, I would love to get to that piece, the abstaining, the benefits of that. But just before we do, I really wanted to highlight what you just spoke to, because we've mentioned this in other podcast episodes. But in traditional Chinese medicine, the nature of sexual energy is an accelerant. They teach that it binds and amplifies whatever's going on emotionally, physically, energetically, spiritually, you name it, like on all levels. It's just turning up the volume knob on your inner landscape. So if there's dissonance within you, it's going to be amplifying the ways that you are out of integrity with yourself, or that you're not in, you don't have self-love. Maybe you have self-hatred, or you have stories or programs running that you picked up from your childhood. Many of us, all of us for the most part, do, like myself included. I know Hawks too. So I just wanted to really double click on sitting with the discomfort, like you're talking about, Hawks, easing into it, not making things black and white, and also seeking community and support.
Hmm.
And like that's exactly why we created Men's Sexual Mastery. That's why we have our brotherhood. That's why we have our calls every week. We have daily accountability. We have one-on-one coaching, depending on where guys are at, to work through those blocks. Because in isolation, most of the time, in my experience, most of the time in isolation, it's nearly impossible. It was impossible in my life to have ever broken free from porn. So I'm not saying you have to join a program or something, but I think having people to hold you accountable, having a men's group around you, like, and if you're interested, of course, reach out to us. um, that's a key piece. And also at the same time, that also addresses some of the other needs that we're talking about that you may be bypassing, of loneliness and going to porn. Like having brotherhood, having community around you, it's like filling a social need, and also, we can get into it a little later too, but like putting yourself out there, meeting your edge, going on out on dates, or just going out and interacting with women and directing all that energy of desire you have into those spaces, and fulfilling yourself, getting to the root of it and fulfilling it, instead of trying to synthetically, bypass it with pornography, is the entire subject here. But I did want to get back to community as like a
Hmm.
piece in a deep, powerful piece, a pillar in that process of really getting into our bodies and moving through whatever's stored there. Because ultimately, all of this sexual mastery work, we say it's nervous system mastery, but it's also like a form of life mastery, and there's no way in but through, like you said, like until we face the dissonance within ourselves, which most of the time is the driving factor in men seeking porn, to dissociate from the discomfort. Like, this is the root, and once we learn how to move through that, and have the tools to move through these difficult emotions and all these programs and release all these limiting beliefs and all these projections and victimhood and all of that. And that's a lot of what we do in our community. Then we can allow our sexual energy to actually move through the body. Like, then everyone wants, the multi-orgasmic full body orgasm states and, becoming an epic lover and all this stuff. But what we're talking about right now is that you got to have a solid foundation of self-love and self-discipline and community and structure and coherence in your life. So
Mm-hmm.
I really just wanted to, double click and just really echo these points right now, because I think we're touching the most important piece in what I see in porn addiction or sex addiction, for a lot of men.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the community and brotherhood support is so real. We've had so many men speak to that specific phenomena of like, oh, I would not have been able to do this without the community support. Even just in our recent 21-day semen intention challenge on our free school community, we had guys, mentioning in there like, oh, I was going to, I was going into patterns of, feeling that pull towards porn use. And then I remembered, like I'm checking in tomorrow with the group, and
Mm-hmm.
there's other guys that are going through this challenge alongside me. And I want to be able to check in tomorrow in integrity with my commitment. And I also recognize that me moving through this challenge in myself right now is providing strength and support for the other men who I'm connected with who are also moving through a similar challenge. And this is a good segue into the abstinence period, because like we've said, this isn't black and white in our perspective, and we're not going to sit here and tell you that you must remove porn from your life completely forever. Otherwise, you're a bad man or you're failing in some way. The What we do invite to for every man is, if you have not gone through a significant period of time without using porn or without having ejaculations, there is a really important set of data that you've yet to expose yourself to. I equate this to, eating healthy. If you've been eating fast food and junk food, processed foods, and factory farmed meats and pesticide sprayed vegetables, if you've been eating in that way your whole life, there's no reference point for how good you could actually feel in your body. And so to cut out certain foods that are, across the board known to wreak havoc in our body, like seed oils, highly processed foods, refined sugars, uh, alcohol, gluten for many, many people is also, a big culprit of chronic inflammation that can create a background level of dis-ease in your body. And going through a period of eating really clean, going through an elimination diet, and allowing your body to actually recalibrate to a different level of well-being provides a reference point for us where all of a sudden, and I'm speaking from experience because I went through this myself, where all of a sudden, like, my acne went away. Chronic inflammation that was having me wake up just uncomfortable and stiff all the time, feeling fatigue and drained and just feeling like I needed a nap. All of these elements dissolved as I cleaned up my diet. And then I got to live in my body in a new experience where all of a sudden I felt vital finally. I could look in the mirror and see like clear skin that I was happy to go out in the world in. And without that experience of removing the toxins, I would have never known what was possible. But once I got a taste for that, it was just a clear, obvious choice for me to continue eating healthy because it felt so good.
Mm-hmm.
How good it felt. vastly outweighed the temporary pleasure
Hmm.
or convenience of eating shitty food.
Yeah.
And so it's a very similar process that happens when we start removing porn and coming into a harmonious ejaculation period, meaning that we're not depleting ourselves through chronic
Mhm.
ejaculations. We're finding our own rhythm and cadence of ejaculation that is probably less often than you're currently engaging in if you're new to this work. And it is uncomfortable to remove those self-soothing practices or foods or the convenience of being able to just, jerk off and fall asleep quickly. But actually, when we clean this stuff up and when we remove porn and ejaculation, even if it's just for 1 week or 2 weeks as a starting point, which is accessible and it's not a gargantuan, commitment that we're likely to fail. It gives us this little window of a different type of experience. We get to feel the energy and vitality in our body, and we get to feel this coherence that you're speaking to, and the alignment of integrity, being like, oh, I said I was going to do something and I did it. I have felt like porn use is not in alignment for me, and now I'm not using it, even if it's just for a week or 2 weeks. And men always report back to us like, yeah, I'm moving in the world, having more engaging conversations with people. I feel more
Mhm.
present. I'm able to look women in the eye and actually have the energy and the confidence to be the man that I know I'm here to be, that I know I'm capable
Mhm.
of being.
Like I'm working out, like I gotta send this energy somewhere. My workout, I'm crushing it.
Yeah,
I'm breaking new records. Like that's a
that
common experience too.
that
Yeah.
all tends to come, a little further down the road after a month or
Mhm.
two of being, in a more cleaned up sexual expression. And so
Mhm.
this is all to say that giving
Oh,
ourselves the
I'll
opportunity, let me just finish this,
okay.
giving ourselves
Yeah.
the opportunity to feel what's possible in our body and to have that data to then be able to make an informed decision. My partner Aspen, she's a naturopathic doctor and she works with many of her clients, discovering what their food allergies are, things like dairy or gluten, that or eggs that many people eat, but without realizing that, oh, this is actually having a background, detrimental effect on my body. And then she looks at it as, okay, you now have informed consent. If these foods are triggering inflammation and a subtle or more intense allergic response in your body, you can still choose to keep eating them if it's really worth it for you, but you now are doing it with informed consent because you understand that there are consequences and you know which foods are going to have that impact on you. So there's an informed consent to say, okay, I'm going to eat this food now. And this is the same thing with ejaculation or porn use. Once we understand how it can feel removing those things, then if and when we choose to engage, it's from a place of informed consent where we actually understand the impact that it can have, and that's empowerment.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love all of this. I mean, that's been my experience as well. I know so many guys who've come through our training is like they say it's like getting off junk food and you just lose your taste for it. And like, oh, it's so nice to not be shoving down and castrating our sexuality as the only means to deal with the problem. And I think that's what a lot of the traditional like Sexaholics Anonymous and Sex and Porn Addicts Anonymous like, and we've had those guys come through this training, but I know that's been kind of the primary way to move through this, and that does work for many men. We're not down, we're not like poo pooing on that or anything, but this is just an upgraded software where you don't have to fight it and shove it down. You can just again just replace it with something that's so much more nourishing and fulfilling and empowering. And then eventually, like you're saying, that you have informed consent. You try going back to the junk food after you've been eating really clean for months, and you can feel the contrast, and you're like, man, I just feel like shit. and like eventually it's just a no-brainer, and it just feels better. Um, so yeah, I think that's a great place to land. I was going to mention earlier when you were sharing, one other thing that a lot of guys notice in this work, especially a month or two in, that's worth mentioning is if you have a meditation practice, if you have a breathwork practice or martial arts or Tai Chi or Qigong, any sort of spiritual practices you have are also incredibly heightened as well. So I just wanted to pin that one in there as well on the list. Um, so yeah, I feel like this is a great wrap of an episode here on just tools for guys getting started who are struggling with porn use. Is there anything else, Hawks, you want to add in before we close out?
Sure. I'll just come back to the community support one more time here, and tying it back to the that period of abstinence, the exploration of, okay, what what might it feel like if I was to cut these things out for a period of time? I think one of the benefits that something like SAA or like Porn Addicts Anonymous, there's community support there, and you have your sponsor. This is like traditional accountability support, and this is what we also incorporate in our programs. And it's even just going 1 week without porn or without ejaculation is a big stretch for many men. But when we have that community support where we're checking in daily, and when, as you were speaking to earlier, the sexual energy that starts to accumulate in our system when we're not just releasing it all of the time, that will stir some things up, the good, the comfortable, and the uncomfortable. And so having a place where we can also bring the processes that we're moving through. Say like, oh, this came up for me today. I was super irritable. I was being triggered. I went into some old wounding. I got in a fight with my partner, and I realized that I totally regressed to this old pattern of defensiveness and feeling like, insecure in these ways, and just having a brotherhood where you can bring that stuff to that's coming up, where you're just going to be held with compassion and acceptance, and also called into your greatness, being like, yeah, I hear you, bro. What are you going to do about it? Like, are you doing
Mhm.
the practices? There's ways to move through this, or just like, yeah, thanks, bro, I hear you, that's
Mhm.
valid. And then that allows us to just release some of the heaviness and the burden of feeling all this bigness and not having anywhere to go with it. And it's
Mhm.
important, if you're in a relationship, that you do have outlets and men who you can go to
Support.
with these
Yeah.
challenges, so that it's not all landing on your intimate partner, because
Yeah.
it's not her responsibility to carry all of your emotional baggage for you, or even
Yeah.
to witness you in all of the depths of your emotional turmoil. It's great if you've built
Mhm.
enough trust where you can, trust and mutual support, where you can share these things. But that takes time to get to, and even if you're there, it's still incredibly valuable to have outlets where you can
Mhm.
bring some of that heaviness, so it's not all just ending up on one person who is also there to wear the hat of your lover, and to
Mhm.
surrender to you, and to trust your lead, and to feel your strength and your solidness. And you can be solid while still, having the heaviness of emotional turmoil coming up in you, but it requires a support web that's bigger than just one person. And so, yeah, shout out to the brothers in the MSM community, the way that the men show up to support each other, and to also just be radically honest and vulnerable, to allow themselves to be seen and to be supported by the other men in there. It's so encouraging and
Mhm.
inspiring. So yeah, big shout out to the guys in our communities. And if you're interested in finding out what it could be like to have some brotherhood support in this arena of sexual mastery, and with it the life mastery that you were speaking to, Ben, love
Mhm.
to have you come join us in our school community. You search Men's Sexual Mastery on School, SKOOL, and you'll find us in there.
Yeah, and we have a group training as well launching June 3rd. And that's if you want to get in a deeper dive. And that's actually like the full on daily accountability, all the structures, the content, Hawks and I coaching every call. That's the deep dive. And yeah, if you're interested, reach out, check us out on mensexualmastery.com. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and come check out the comprehensive course that we've built for this with
mhm,
all of the tools and the
mhm,
knowledge and those software upgrades that allow a lot of these ideas to actually be understood on a deep level that then inspires the
mhm,
implementation, because we understand the why, and then there's the step-by-step protocols that give us the clear instructions, so there isn't
mhm,
the confusion or paradox of choice of, yeah, but there's all these different practices I could do, which one am I going to do?
mhm.
You want the
Yeah.
clear step-by-step framework that's simplified and potent, then that's what we've developed, and I just love to share. So yeah, and if you're out there and you're struggling and you're feeling that call to refine and make some shifts in your own approach to your sexual energy, to start removing porn from your life. I hope that what we've shared here can provide you with some clarity and some actionable steps, and yeah, just blessings on your path, and
Mhm,
just know that you know it's it's okay where you're at right now.
mhm.
That's okay too. You're right where you're meant to be,
You're not alone.
and you're not alone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of guys who, yeah, myself being one chief among them, just struggling with this. And there is a path, and you're not alone. And it's harder than ever with the digital landscape and AI and everything right now. It's a fucking hard times to be carrying your, these huge amounts of sexual energy, which actually I just want to mention are your superpower. Like if
Mhm.
you're a man who has huge sexual compulsions and just huge amounts of sexual energy, like, wow, what a gift. Just like celebrating you in that.
Mhm.
Like, let's just line that up and let's channel that in a way that's actually generative and fulfilling
Hey,
and building, powerful relationships and a powerful lovership with your, future partner and family and all that. So that's what we're here to serve. So for the future of humanity, this is what it's about, generations to come. So yeah, prayers out to you, brothers. And yeah, we'll see you on the next episode. So peace.
amen.